On today's episode, we're going to talk about all the Week 7 matchups, plus all my starts and sits for Week 7, and big news coming out of Tampa Bay, coming right up. And what's up, everyone? You're listening to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast for Saturday, October 24th, 2020. And I'm Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So, please hit subscribe, support the show, hit the bell so you don't miss another episode. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about all my start sits for Week 7, plus all the Week 7 matchups. But before we get into any of that, let's get into some of the big news that took place on Friday. So the biggest news is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed wide receiver Antonio Brown to a one-year deal. Mr. Big Chest is going to be coming to Tampa to join Tom Brady and reunite with him. And, honestly, as a Bucs fan, I'm trying to kind of still figure out exactly how do I feel about this. I think that obviously, this gives us the opportunity to have a very lethal offense. We know that Antonio Brown is suspended until after Week 8, so he can come back in Week 9 against the New Orleans Saints. But from a football logistics standpoint, the Bucs are all in. The Bucs are trying to win a Super Bowl. They know that their time frame with Tom Brady is very short, and they're putting all their eggs in one basket, trying to figure out how they can make this offense pretty much impossible to stop. And the addition to Antonio Brown is very surprising to me as a Bucs fan, because Bruce Arians was the head coach for the Bucs, was very adamant that they're not bringing Antonio Brown into that locker room and onto that team. So when Brady tried to advocate for him when he signed with the Bucs, Bruce Arians is like, no, we have targets, we have talent, we don't need Antonio Brown. So it was just one of those things that just was the end of the conversation. But now I was watching some of what Jay Glazer had said. He had tweeted out a video saying that the reason why the Bucs are signing Antonio Brown and why Bruce Arians is okay with now signing Antonio Brown is because they're definitely banged up at wide receiver. Mike Evans is dealing with a ankle sprain. You have Chris Godwin that's dealing with a hamstring issue. So right now they're not 100% healthy at the wide receiver position. So the signing of Antonio Brown makes sense, because if, God forbid, if one of those receivers goes down, they at least have someone like Antonio Brown. And we're assuming Antonio Brown is the elite wide receiver that we know of since 2010. So I think, from a football logistics standpoint, I think this really puts Tampa Bay on paper as a very, very lethal offense that may be the best assembled I've seen. I know the Chiefs, they got Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, the Chiefs are a very lethal offense too. But it's very interesting to kind of see how a healthy Godwin, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, a healthy Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, Gronkowski, those things make me excited to watch from a non-fantasy football standpoint, as a Bucs fan standpoint, watch that team the rest of the season. So I'm excited as a Bucs fan. Now, what does that mean for fantasy? I'm trying to figure out when it comes to his upside, when it comes to fantasy. We all know that Antonio Brown has humongous upside in a sense of potential. However, I don't know. I think personally he's a wide receiver 3 and a flex every week. I think that he should be played on your roster every single week in a sense of at least a flex. I say that because we know that the chemistry that Tom Brady and Antonio Brown had in that game that they played against the Dolphins last year, he was the most targeted. He scored a touchdown. That was the first game that Tom Brady had with Antonio Brown. But my problem is with the fantasy value is that there's too many people on the Tampa Bay offense that make me feel like Antonio Brown has some upside. No, or he has a capped upside because we know Mike Evans. He's the deep threat, tall, lanky, fast receiver. Chris Godwin, he's the guy who's going to play in the slot, and I'm assuming Antonio Brown's going to be playing on the other side of the ball as the other perimeter receiver. So I try to look at it from a fantasy standpoint, from a wide receiver in that group that I think it doesn't hurt. I think it's Chris Godwin. I think Chris Godwin plays in the slot. And so Tom Brady likes throwing to the slot, so I think his value stays a little bit the same. I think it hurts Mike Evans because he is a perimeter wide receiver, and I feel like the targets just won't be there for Mike Evans. And then obviously Antonio Brown, that's something that because Tom Brady has a connection with Antonio Brown by playing with the Patriots. Like, does he gravitate towards more Antonio Brown? I don't know. This is all speculation. But when you have 3 legit number 1 wide receivers on your roster, that you're not going to be able to make everyone happy. So I think that what's going to be interesting to see, one, how good of in shape that Antonio Brown is. Is he still that elite wide receiver, that elite route runner? Is he a guy that knows that he's not going to be the center of attention? He's not going to be the number 1 guy. And coming to a team that has a really good locker room and knowing that if he screws up once, he's done. So, I do think we'll get the best version of Antonio Brown. I just don't know, when it comes to fantasy, if he's a guy that, if he's on your waiver wire right now, like I said, maybe you drop him and you pick him up and see what his potential is. But is he a guy that I'm going to, drop a potential, a running back or a guy that you're going to start in your wide receiver 3 or your flex position? I don't know. That's another decision that you have to make based on your roster structure. But it's just very interesting. I think that it's going to be fun to watch, but I think as a fantasy owner, it's going to be very frustrating to watch. I kind of look at it as what's going on with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they got Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and they got CeeDee Lamb. So, as of right now, CeeDee Lamb's the one benefiting who plays the slot. He's benefiting from being a superior talent, taking advantage of the mismatches he gets lined up against him at the cornerback position in the slot. And I think this is where I feel like Chris Godwin benefits because he's going to be playing the slot. He'll get the mismatches because there's no way that you can double team. If you double team one of them is going to be open. So my guess is based on how Antonio Brown looks, that's where the defense is going to gravitate to. So are they going to double Mike Evans or are they going to double Antonio Brown? Who knows? But if you double anybody, at least single coverage to the other 2 receivers, and then you're screwed. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I don't want to talk about everyone's talking about on paper how this Tampa Bay Bucs team is a Super Bowl caliber team that can be a Super Bowl winning team. I think that's a little too carried away. Yes, they have a good defense. Their offense is going to look pretty good, based on what they're looking like once everyone it's clicking to that offense with Antonio Brown. It's just, Super Bowl talk is a little premature in my view, and this is coming from a Bucs fan, so we'll see. But overall, I mean, it's going to be a interesting year in Tampa Bay going forward. But and another piece of the news that's Tampa Bay related. So if you didn't seen already that the Tampa Bay Bucs were playing the the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday Night Football, and it came out that apparently the offensive linemen of the Las Vegas Raiders decided to have a slumber party, and they got one of the offensive linemen got COVID. They had to shut down practice, and then it looks like that there's a chance that they may not have all their offensive linemen. So they have to play practice squad players, and they had to move the game from Sunday Night Football to 4:05 on Sunday. And it's just one of those things where when I look at this with the offensive line being kind of in disarray, that where they're going to have to play some practice squad players, I mean, that's just bad for Josh Jacobs' upside. That's bad for Derek Carr. I just don't know, based on the Bucs pass rush, I feel like if this is going to be an ugly game, but I know that the NFL had to make this move in the schedule because they had to make sure that they had a Sunday night game that was going to be on TV, which they moved the Cardinals versus Seahawks to Sunday night. So as of right now, the game is set to play on Sunday, but the Raiders are going to be hurting on offensive line, which it could be eventually be an ugly game for them. So we'll see. But so the first game that I'm going to preview is the Lions versus the Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are favored by 2.5 points. They have an over-under of 54.5. And when it comes to the pieces you're going to start in this game, Matt Ryan, he's a must start. Now that he has Julio Jones back, we saw what happens to his fantasy value when Julio Jones is back in the lineup. He's a must start. Obviously you're starting Matthew Stafford. The Falcons have one of the worst pass defense and one of the worst defenses overall. And Matthew Stafford, I think, is going to have a field day on this defense. At running back, you're going to start Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley, to me, is more of an RB2 this week. At wide receiver, you're going to start Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley is going to be a must start. I think he has one of the most favorable matchups when it comes to the wide receiver to cornerback matchup. So he's going to have a field day against the Lions defense. And then Kenny Golladay, he's a must start. Now he has the best matchup versus cornerback in this game. He's going against Kendall Sheffield. So that right there will hopefully allow Kenny Golladay to have one of those breakout games, that he hasn't really had this year. He had 4 catches for over 100 yards last week, so he hasn't scored. So hopefully he'll be able to get some yardage and score a touchdown in this game. And then at tight end, you're going to start TJ Hawkinson. I think this is a good matchup for him. On the Atlanta side of the ball, I think you can start Hayden Hurst. He is a fringe tight end 1, so he's a guy that he benefits as well with Julio Jones being back on the field. He sees about 5 to 6 targets a game. So with that being the case, hopefully he becomes efficient with it. He gets a touchdown like he did last week. But I think Hayden Hurst is a guy that you can play. But the problem is the Lions are very stingy against the tight end. They're only giving up 4.3 points, fantasy points per game, which is 4th fewest. So even though the offense the Falcons have is, with Julio Jones in the lineup, is a very good offense. From the tight end position, the Detroit Lions are very good at guarding the tight end. So I feel like the expectations for Hayden Hurst has to be very, very limited just because of how stingy the Lions are. But when it comes to the flex, I think the DeAndre Swift, I think after his breakout game, I know that he still is only playing 40% of the snaps, but I do think that this was kind of his coming out party in the sense of where the Lions are going to use him. I think they're going to use him a lot more. So I think that after last week, I think DeAndre Swift deserves to be in your flex. And I think the same thing for Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson, he continues not to go away in this offense. He continues to get a lot of rushes, and he may fall into the end zone and get you a touchdown. So I think that, if you're on a bye week or dealing with injuries, I think that Adrian Peterson is a flex option. And then when it comes to boom bust players in this game, I do think that Brian Hill, he has some opportunity to be a boom bust because, when Todd Gurley is getting the touchdowns, Todd Gurley's not getting the yards, and and that's when Brian Hill's getting more of the yards, but he's not getting the touchdowns. So he's a guy that, if you have better options, go with that. But Brian Hill can be one of those boom bust players. The same thing for Russell Gage and Marvin Jones. I think, Russell Gage, he benefits as well. He in the beginning of the season was seeing a lot of targets. He was actually out targeting Julio Jones. It was in the beginning of the season, it was Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage having the target share lead. But, it's one of those things where he kind of tampered off a little bit in the last few weeks. So he's a hard player to play just because he hasn't been doing well in the last few weeks. And the same thing for Marvin Jones. I pushed for Marvin Jones in earlier podcasts, thinking when we look at the value you spent on Kenny Golladay compared to Marvin Jones, you can get more value from Marvin Jones based on draft position. But as of right now, he's not having a good season. But if you're in a deeper league, you need wide receiver help, Marvin Jones could potentially have a big game against the Falcons defense. And then going to the Browns versus the Bengals, the Cleveland Browns are favored in this game by 3 points. It's over under 50.5. In this game, you're going to start Joe Burrow. I think that I have confidence in Joe Burrow because he scored in the first meeting against Cleveland. He scored 33 fantasy points. So that is encouraging for somebody who can be a streamer this week if you're in a 1 quarterback league. Obviously, if you're in a 2 quarterback league, you're starting them anyways. But I do think because of the meeting they had last, this is a home game. So them being at home, playing against a very bad Browns secondary and defense, I think that Cleveland could have some trouble against Joe Burrow this game. And that running back, you're going to start Kareem Hunt. You're starting, well, right now, with Joe Mixon out, I think Giovanni Bernard becomes a top 20 type of running back this week. He definitely doesn't have the same talent that Joe Mixon has, but Joe Mixon's out with a foot injury. So I think if you're a Joe Mixon owner, if you're able to get Giovanni Bernard, I think you can play him with a lot of confidence. But I said the same thing last week about Alexander Mattison, and he was awful. So it's, play at your own risk, but I do think that, Giovanni Bernard can have a good game substituting for Joe Mixon. And when it comes to wide receiver, I think you can still play OBJ. I think OBJ is one of those guys where it's hard to sit based on his talent. He can pop off for 30 points or he can give you 5 points. So, that's the risk you take with OBJ based on how the game script is. But OBJ is a guy you just can't bench. And then at tight end, Austin Hooper was a guy that I was really excited about this week. I had him in my starting lineup. I had picked him up in my main league. And I was excited because the Bengals are awful against the tight end. And Austin Hooper was getting enough targets where he was getting, at least 5 targets a game. And he was getting, in the offense that's a run-heavy offense with OBJ, with Jarvis Landry, it was hard to see his value. But he's been consistently good, at least from a tight end standpoint, the last 3 weeks. So he was going to be a guy that I was excited to play. But he's injured. He had a appendectomy, so he will be out for at least, obviously this week and possibly next week. But then again, do you pivot to David Njoku or Harrison Bryant? It depends on who's available in your league, if there's a better play. But the matchup against the Bengals is very good, so I wouldn't be surprised if someone like David Njoku or Harrison Bryant do well just because of the poor defense they have against the tight end. But it's just one of these, if you have a better pivot to that. And then in the flex, I think Tyler Boyd, I think T. Higgins are good options this week just because of the Cleveland Browns secondary. I think they can be good upside guys. And then Jarvis Landry, of course, is always going to be a good upside guy just based on the target share. And then he's the guy that does more of the short to intermediate routes, and he's more in the slot. So I think that Jarvis Landry has some safe flex appeal. And then when it comes to the boom-bust person in this game, I think it's A.J. Green. So A.J. Green had a very good game last week, but he's been awful games prior to that. So do you chance the fact that A.J. Brown or A.J. Green is going to, have the same production he did last week? We don't know. If he's lined up against Denzel Ward, on Sunday, that may not happen. That may be an issue where they're going to let, Tyler Boyd and, T. Higgins kind of do their thing and then try to isolate A.J. Green. So we'll see, but he's a guy that's definitely a boom bust for me. And then you're sitting Baker Mayfield and you're going to sit Drew Sample. Baker Mayfield, he's very, I don't know, it's very hot and cold. He can be coming out hot in one half and then can be complete garbage the second. So he's a guy that I'm going to sit. But if you're in a 2-quarterback league, I understand why you're going to have to play him just because of bye weeks or not. But Baker Mayfield in a 1-quarterback league is a sit for me. Now moving on to the Steelers versus the Titans. The Tennessee Titans are actually favored by a point here. The over-under is 50.5. I do think that Ryan Tannehill and Big Ben are 2 good startable quarterbacks this week. Ryan Tannehill continues to prove people wrong. He continues to be very efficient. And I think that, the Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of in the lower half against the pass. So I do think that Ryan Tannehill could potentially have a big game. With Big Ben, there's so many weapons that he has. I can't imagine him not having a big game this game. But it's one of those things that Tennessee Titans, they have a good defense too. So I think that this could be either way. It could be a complete snooze fest and being a 9-3 game, or this is going to be a shootout. So I'm hoping for the shootout, but we'll see. At running back, you're going to start Derrick Henry. You're going to play James Conner. At wide receiver, you're going to play A.J. Brown. I think Chase Claypool is a player that you have to play every week now. I don't think he's done enough so far. Now, he's done this production without Deontay Johnson on the field. The thing is that Deontay Johnson is back on the field, which is it's likely on Sunday. How does that affect Chase Claypool? So it's a risk playing Chase Claypool, but I think that it's hard not to, after the last 2 weeks, it's hard to bench him. And then Jonnu Smith, he's a guy that he should be started. However, he is dealing with that ankle sprain. So is he a guy that is active, but then you start him, but then all of a sudden he goes out for 1 or 2 series and busts his ankle up again, and then he's out for the rest of the game. So that's the risk you take when it comes to playing guys that have some type of injury. And when it comes to flex, I think Juju, it's kind of this unfortunate circumstance with Juju is that he's just now he's going lower and lower on the weekly rankings because he is just not getting it done. So is this a game that he finally turns it around? We don't know yet, but I guess if you do have him on your roster, you do have to play Juju. I mean, he's a guy that could definitely have a good game, but it's unfortunate that it's looking like Chase Claypool and Dante Johnson are the guys who are kind of taking over right now, and Juju's just kind of like that at best flex appeal type of player. And then you're going to sit Eric Ebron. This is a game that if you're an Eric Ebron owner or you've played Eric Ebron like I did last week, you're very disappointed. I don't know if I want to get on that train again. I don't want to play Eric Ebron. I think that he's too volatile, and when you need to have a win or you need some clear upside, it's hard to trust Eric Ebron right now. So I'm not playing him. I think he's a sit. I think there's better options out there. Okay, so I'm moving on to the Panthers versus Saints. The Saints are favored in this game by 7 points. The over-under is 51.5. And in this game, I think it's safe you can start Drew Brees. This is going to be more of a QB2 type of situation for me because now he's out. He doesn't have Michael Thomas and he doesn't have Emmanuel Sanders. So I think that he definitely is a playable, fantasy quarterback this week, but I think that his upside is now capped because he's lost 2 of his main wide receivers. So I think Drew Brees is one of those high risk, high reward type of starts this week. I think Teddy Bridgewater as well as a quarterback too as well. I think that he's a guy he had a very bad game last week, but I think that he could turn around on the Saints defense. They have enough weapons where I think it allows Teddy Bridgewater to have a safe floor and in this game. And then when it comes to running back, obviously Alvin Kamara, you're playing him. I think what benefits with Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders being out, I think this benefits Alvin Kamara tremendously. Because right now the Saints are hurting, so they have as options they have Traquan Smith. So I think Traquan Smith becomes a very interesting start for the week because of the loss of Emmanuel Sanders because of COVID and Michael Thomas is dealing with a hamstring. So I do think that this game we'll see more of the offense funnel towards and with Alvin Kamara because of the losses they have on offense. But I think obviously Mike Davis is a must start. This is probably going to be his last game that he's going to be the full workhorse for the Carolina Panthers because Christian McCaffrey is hopefully going to be back next week. But he's a guy that you have to play. And then, like I said, Michael Thomas is out, Emmanuel Sanders is out, so those are guys that need to be on your bench. Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, you're going to start those wide receivers. They're having great seasons. The touchdowns haven't been there, but from a target share standpoint and yardage, they're good for PPR formats. And I think that Jared Cook, he's been averaging 5.7 points per game, but I do think that the loss of Emmanuel Sanders and Michael Thomas gives Jared Cook some appeal. And then at a flex, I think Latavius Murray is a good flex. We've seen the usage that they're dealing with Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray. The last Monday night game they played against the Chargers is every single series that started, Murray always came on the field first, and then they're always rotating Kamara and Murray out. And I don't know if that's something they're going to do again this week. It didn't seem to work for them, in Monday night. So hopefully they keep Kamara on the field and he gets majority of those early down snaps. But we'll see. And then, like I said, boom bust wise, I think that you can roll with Traquan Smith. Someone has to get the targets. With 2 receivers out, I think that Traquan Smith becomes a decent play this week. And same as with Jared Cook. I think that he had a touchdown in Monday Night Football against the Chargers. And like I said, targets have to go somewhere. I think Jared Cook could have a quiet, a good game this week, kind of under the radar. And then going to the Bills versus the Jets. The Bills are favored by 12.5 points and the over-under is 45. I mean, you're pretty much starting all your Bills. You're starting Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, Stephon Diggs. I think Cole Beasley has a flex appeal in PPR formats. You're going to play on the Jet side of the ball. You're playing Jamison Crowder. But the interesting thing is, like, Rashad Perriman's back, and Denzel Mims coming back. So this is going to be the first game, if everyone's active, we're going to see Sam Darnold with Jamison Crowder. He's going to have Denzel Mims, and he's going to have Brashad Perriman. And then you have Chris Herndon at the tight end position. So I think that very interesting on how the offense will look for the Jets on Sunday. But when it comes to like boom bust players, I think Michael Pirine, the running back for the New York Jets, they've got rid of Le'Veon Bell. He's on the Chiefs now, and so it leaves Frank Gore and Michael Pirine. So I think that you have to see what the workload is before you can really trust Pirine. But I think that because he's in a timeshare with Frank Gore, I feel like there could be some boom bust potential there. Same with Frank Gore. You're sitting Sam Darnold. I'm not playing Sam Darnold in any league that I don't have to against the Bills defense. Zach Moss, you're going to sit him. John Brown, he's dealing with a calf injury. I just don't think that's a safe play. He got you no points last week, so I think he's okay to be benched. And then there's no tight end on the Bills you're going to play. But when it comes to Chris Herndon, I know this is a name that maybe makes you throw up in your mouth a little bit, but I do think that the Bills do give up 13.4 points per game to the tight end position. So is Chris Herndon like maybe a quiet, sneaky play this week because of if they do have Jamison Crowder, Denzel Mims, and Brashad Perriman back, does it leave some potential of Chris Herndon to have like that breakout game? So I just go based on statistics and kind of what they give up from a fantasy standpoint to the tight end position. The Bills are not very good at it, so I think that's a potential he could have a touchdown this game. Now moving on to the Cowboys versus the Washington football team. Dallas is favored by 1 point. The over-under is 46. Now, this game, you're not going to play any quarterback in this game. I don't think that, after what I saw from Andy Dalton, unless you're in a 2-quarterback league, you're not going to play Andy Dalton. But you're not playing Kyle Allen or Alex Smith, whoever decides to be the starter for Washington. But at running back, you're starting Zeke. You're starting Antonio Gibson. At wide receiver, you're going to start Terry McLaurin. You're going to play Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, to me, I think with Andy Dalton, is more of a wide receiver 2. CeeDee Lamb now becomes more of a wide receiver 3 and a flex for me. And then when it comes to an actual flex option, J.D. McKissick becomes a flex option for me just based on the steady targets he gets out of the backfield. He's not going to get the majority of the carries, but he does his work like Chris Thompson did in this backfield. So I think he does have some flex appeal. And then when it comes to boom bust, I mean, Michael Gallup, he's taken the biggest hit, especially in the one game that we've seen with Andy Dalton. It was, he threw the ball 54 times, and then Michael Gallup only had 6 targets. So I think that it's a wait-and-see approach with Michael Gallup. I hope that he gets a little more involved, but I think this was hard with fantasy-wise. There's only going to be so much, mouths to feed, and I think right now their main targets are Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. At tight end, you can try to play Dalton Schultz. I think that it potentially could be a decent game. Logan Thomas, obviously we know the Cowboys are a bad pass defense, so he could have a potential good game. But this is one of those games where Washington has a decent pass rush and it has a decent defense. So I'm gonna, as of right now, I am benching CeeDee Lamb in my league. I'm gonna go with the stack of Joe Burrow and T Higgins in my league for the upside, but. It's the first week that I'm not going to start CeeDee Lamb, so hopefully that doesn't nip me in the butt. But I just think Washington has a very underrated defense that could potentially cause problems for fantasy potential this week. And then going on to the Packers versus the Texans, Green Bay is favored by 3.5 points. The over-under is 57, and you're going to start your Deshaun Watsons, the Aaron Rodgers. I just hope that Aaron Rodgers can double check himself into a better game. Awful performance against the Bucs. Only had like 4 points, and hopefully he's able to turn around. It doesn't look like he's going to have Aaron Jones in this game. He's dealing with a calf injury, which sucks because the Texans have the worst rush defense. They're giving up 27.6 points per game to the running back position. So if Jamal Williams is the starter, if Aaron Jones is out, it's a potential big game for Jamal Williams, and A.J. Dillon's going to be probably part of that as well. So I think that if you're able to pick up Jamal Williams, it'd probably see if he's on your waiver wire. And then you're going to start David Johnson. He's more of an RB2 this week, but you're starting him. At wide receiver, you're also going to start Devontae Adams and Will Fuller. At tight end, I think that Robert Tonyan does have a decent game. The Texans are giving up 9.3 fantasy points to the tight end position, so I think that he has a bounce back game. He didn't have a very good game against the Bucs, obviously, but hopefully he has a bounce back game on Sunday. And then as a flex option, I think Brandon Cooks has deserved that right to be in your flex. He's had 2 good back-to-back games, and I think that trend can continue with being a flex option. And then, like I said, I think from a boom-bust standpoint, I think Darren Fells, the tight end for the Houston Texans, has some appeal there. So it's going to be interesting how this game plays out. Are the Packers going to rebound from an embarrassing loss to the Bucs? So we'll see. Now going on to the Bucs versus the Raiders. This game is, like I said, it got moved to the 4:05 time slot, and the Bucs are favored by 3 points. The over-under is 53.5. I think that Tom Brady, he is a guy that I didn't mention at the top of the podcast, but I think Tom Brady is obviously the guy who benefits the most from a fantasy value standpoint. I think that you can see Tom Brady being a QB1 the rest of the season. I think that there's just too much potential in that offense for him not to be fantasy relevant every single week. So I think Tom Brady it's a must start in this game. Now Derek Carr, my opinion changed a little bit about Derek Carr because of the offensive lineman problem with the COVID incident. So Derek Carr, he's a guy that if you're in a 2-quarterback league, you may start, but you may want to look for a way to pivot out of that. You're going to start Josh Jacobs. It's hard not to start Josh Jacobs. The problem is the Bucs have their second best rush defense. They're giving up like less than 3 yards per carry. So I don't see Josh Jacobs having a very good game regardless of who's playing offensive line. It obviously doesn't help that the offensive line is dealing with the COVID situation, but Josh Jacobs, to me, I feel like is going to have a bad game. But you play, on the other side of the ball, you're playing Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones he's the only player so far in 2020 that has 3 100-yard games, in a row. So I think that he continues to have a good game. So Ronald Jones is a good play. You're going to play Chris Godwin. You're playing Mike Evans. At tight end, you're going to play Darren Waller. And I think Gronk is a legitimate starter this week. I'm wondering if we're getting into Gronk season now because we saw potential what he did last week, and he finally had a connection with Tom Brady for a touchdown. So I'm wondering if this is the turnaround where Gronk now is the Gronk that maybe that we haven't seen. He may not be the same player he was like with the Patriots, but I feel like he's maybe the viable tight end one every single week. And especially this week, at tight end, he has the best tight end matchup versus a defense. He's going to be, if he's lined up against Corey Littleton, the linebacker for the Raiders, I do think that this is going to be a matchup where it could be exploited, where it could have a big game. So, I think the Las Vegas Raiders, man, they're going to be hurting this game, in my opinion, and that has nothing to do with me being a Bucs fan. I just think that their offensive line is just going to be atrocious against that pass defense and rushing. So it's one of those things, or I don't know, man. I don't know how that game's going to be played out, but we'll see. And I think from a boom bust standpoint, I think that Henry Ruggs, he's a boom bust type of player for me because you got to look at what his target share is. He only had 2 receptions the last game that the Raiders played, but he had over 100 yards and a touchdown. So for me, do you take that chance? Say you need to shoot your shot in a game that you're playing the best team in the league, and you need something big to happen for you that's going to help kind of get the win in your direction. Is Henry Ruggs a guy that you can play with any confidence? I do think the Bucs have vulnerability against fast wide receivers. I wouldn't be surprised the slightest if Henry Ruggs does get a touchdown, a long bomb touchdown, because we've seen it before. The Bucs, they do break down and cover sometimes, and they miss assignments, and it happens. So I wonder if this is a game where they're dealing with such a fast wide receiver if they give up a touchdown to Henry Ruggs. But going on to the Chiefs versus the Broncos. Now this game, the Kansas City Chiefs are favored by 9.5 points. Over-under is 46. I think you can start Patrick Mahomes. I think that's a safe play this week. I'm not really sure about that, but I think that based on the matchup, I think Patrick Mahomes can be a safe play this week. And that running back, you are going to start Clyde Edwards-Helaire. his upside is definitely going to be limited depending on how much Le'Veon Bell is going to play, but it's the unfortunate nature of bringing in somebody like that if you're a Clyde Edwards-Helaire owner. I mean, it sucks because we saw like that potential last week where he had a great game on the ground. He's still not getting it done at the goal line. He still is getting touchdowns taken away from him based on penalties and just misfortune, but you have to play him. You can't bench him. And that wide receiver, you're playing Tyreek Hill, and tight end wise, you're playing Kelsey and Noah Fant. From the flex, you're going to play Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay. I think Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy are definitely good flex appeal options this week. Boom bust wise, Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell is a guy that if you have him on your roster, you want to play him, and obviously having the opportunity to be on the Chiefs roster, I think that gives you that itch to want to play him. So I think that Le'Veon Bell, he's a boom bust player for me. He could potentially have a good game based on the opportunity that he may get, but just have your expectations a little bit lowered. And then Mecole Hardman, he's always going to be a boom bust because anytime he can, just like Henry Ruggs, I mentioned in the previous game, like Mecole Hardman can be a guy that can get you one reception for 70 yards and a touchdown, and you're having an okay fantasy day from him. So I think that's where you're at when you're looking at where you're trying to play a wide receiver through or flex. And then you're sitting Drew Lock. I don't think Drew Lock is a playable option against the Chiefs defense. I think the Chiefs defense is actually a pretty good play against the Broncos. And then when it comes to the 49ers versus the Patriots are favored by 2 points, and this is a 43.5 over under. You're going to start Cam Newton. He had a bad game last week, but I think that you can start him this week. Jerick McKinnon, I think he's a guy that you can start, with Raheem Mostert out now, back on IR. Looks like he's going to be the lead back for the 49ers. At the tight end position, you're going to play George Kittle. He's obviously a must start every week. The flex, you're going to play James White, Damian Harris. I think Julian Edelman and Deebo Samuel are good flex options in this game. The boom bust candidates in this game, I think JaMycal Hasty. Jeff Wilson was not the next man up in the sense of carries. I think he's still dealing with some type of nagging injury. I'm not 100% certain about that, but there's obviously a reason why we're seeing JaMycal Hasty a little bit more. But I think, with it being the case with Jerick McKinnon being the starter and then needing somebody behind him, I think Hasty does have some, a boom bust potential. And then Rex Burkhead, he's a PPR option for me if you need some upside. Obviously, I think that he does, have that value. And then you're gonna sit Jimmy G. If you're not, he's a low end quarterback too for me this week. I don't think that you can really play him against the Patriots defense. And obviously, he's a play for the Patriots, so I always feel like they know him so well. They know his tendencies. I think they can isolate, Jimmy G this week. And I think they're gonna really hurt his fantasy upside. So I think that he's a guy that I can have as a low end QB too. Then going on to the Jags versus the Chargers. The Chargers are favored by 7.5 points. The over-under is 49. And this is a good game to play Justin Herbert. I had said it for weeks now on the Waiver Wire show that Justin Herbert needs to be added onto your bench to either start him on a weekly basis or at least have him as a streamer. I think this is the week that you can definitely stream him with confidence. I think the same thing with Gardner Minshew. I think he's a good streamer candidate this week. So you can play both quarterbacks in this game. Running back wise, you're playing James Robinson. He saved you last week with a reception touchdown, but I want to see him have more consistency where he's being a consistent running back throughout the whole entire game. At wide receiver, you're playing Keenan Allen. The only problem with Keenan Allen, how healthy is he? We saw him go when he scored a touchdown Monday Night Football. We saw him go off with a back injury. He never came back. He did have a bye week to get right. Is he able to come back in week 7 and play a full game? We don't know, but he definitely, if he's active, you play him. And DJ Chark, he is dealing with an ankle injury. Do you continue to play him and get frustrated with the points that you're not getting from him? But he's the number one wide receiver right now for the Jags. I know it's kind of changing because Keelan Cole is actually producing a little bit more, but I think that DJ Chark's a guy that you can play. Same thing with Hunter Henry. I think he's a good playable tight end this week. He's a must-start tight end every week anyways. From the flex, I think Joshua Kelly and Justin Jackson both can have good games in this game. I know on Monday Night Football last week, we saw Justin Jackson take the majority of the carries. He had the better fantasy game. But I think Joshua Kelly could have also that potential of having a good game. I think both of them could be definitely flex options. Mike Williams, I think Mike Williams is a guy that you could play based on the health of Keenan Allen. We don't know exactly the health of him. He might be active, but how effective will he be? So I think Mike Williams is the guy that definitely could have a decent game this week. Same thing for Laviska Shenault Jr. I think him and Keelan Cole, because they're getting the target share, they're guys that you can play, especially in deeper leagues and in the flex. I think those are good options. And then going to the Sunday night football game, the Seahawks versus the Cardinals. The Seahawks are favored in this game by 3.5 points. The over-under is 56. I think that obviously you can start Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray. I think this is going to be a very fun game. I think that we can potentially see a shootout. I mean, they have the high over-under at 56, but I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. At the running back position, you're playing Chris Carson. You're going to play Kenyon Drake. It's hard not to play him after what you saw last week, so Kenyon Drake definitely is a guy you can play. At wide receiver, you're playing DeAndre Hopkins, you're playing DK Metcalf, and you're playing Tyler Lockett. Now, I know these guys are starters for me, but be careful on what you expect out of this Arizona defense. They actually have a pretty good, pass defense. So if you are playing DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett, just know that they could have the games that you're not expecting, because they've been blowing it up lately. Well, not much as Tyler Lockett, but DK Metcalf has been very, very good. And how does that add up to what he's going to face on Sunday against the Cardinals? So I think that you obviously play him, but what's his upside this week? And then when it comes to, I don't have a flex option, but I think a boom bust candidate in this game is Chase Edmonds and Christian Kirk. Chase Edmonds gave you a dud last week. You probably played him because there are rumors out there that Kenyon Drake was potentially going to lose a starting job to Chase Edmonds, and then look what happens. Drake has the big game. Edmonds has the dud game. So we'll see, especially with Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk has been injured. Last week he had a great game, 2 receptions. He had 2 touchdowns. So I think that is this the beginning of something that could potentially be a consistent thing for Christian Kirk. Like I said, the problem is he needs to stay on the field, and it's hard for him to do that, as of late. But hopefully he can string up a couple games that are good fantasy-wise. And from Monday Night Football, we got Bears versus the Rams. The Rams are favored by 6 points, and the over-under is 44.5. You're going to start David Montgomery. I think that he's getting enough of the workload that he deserves to be started. You always want to see players who have opportunities to have good games based on workload, because at some point he could fall into the end zone. So I think David Montgomery is a good option. I think Darrell Henderson, you start him, but there's going to be a running back by committee. We know that Malcolm Brown is always going to be heavily involved. Cam Akers last week was not. He only had 1 carry. So I think this right now, as I'm sitting here talking about this podcast, on Saturday, there's going to probably be the week where this could be a Malcolm Brown week, right? But we just never know that. But they have situational plays for Malcolm Brown in pass protection in the passing game that Darrell Henderson is just not part of, and so is Cam Akers. So they trust, out of that backfield, they trust Malcolm Brown more when it comes to situational football. So that gives him some appeal, but I think that obviously anybody you play in this backfield is going to be completely just, you're just throwing darts. And then obviously at wide receiver, you're playing Allen Robinson, you're playing Cooper Kupp. Now, Robert Woods, this is going to be an interesting development because he's dealing with a groin injury. He did not practice on Friday. So this makes it seem like it's a possibility that he could miss Sunday if he doesn't have a practice, or if they don't practice. Since they have a game on Monday, they should be practicing today. So none of the reports have coming out yet. So I'll be doing a YouTube video later on about all the injuries and all the ins and outs of Week 7. But as of right now, he was limited in practice on Friday, and the status of his stats for Sunday or Monday night is still unknown. So keep your eyes peeled to the Gridiron Fantasy Football channel, or just some of the NFL news, because I will be breaking all the injury reports out on Saturday later on today. And then at tight end, you're going to play Tyler Higbee. I think that he's definitely been a disappointment in fantasy this year, but I think that the matchup is not terrible, where I think Tyler Higbee could have some appeal there. Jimmy Graham, I think Jimmy Graham definitely has some potential there. The Rams are giving up 8.8 fantasy points per game, so not the sexiest person to play, but I do think that there's some potential Jimmy Graham having a average low end, tight end 1 type of game. And then when it comes to the boom bust can, I think Malcolm Brown, just because of what Sean McVay came out and said this week about why they use Malcolm Brown in certain parts of the game, compared to like Darrell Henderson and then Cam Akers. So I do think that Malcolm Brown does have some potential to have a good PPR game. And then you're going to sit Jared Goff and Nick Foles. The reason why I want to sit Jared Goff is because the Chicago Bears pass defense is so stingy. They've only given up one passing touchdown, and that was to the Tom Brady and the Bucs on Thursday Night Football. So that's why I want to sit Jared Goff. I think that obviously there's potential there in the offense, but if you're dealing with a limped like Robert Woods, and then they don't have everybody on, from a weapon standpoint, I think Jared Goff's value goes down this week. But so that's it for today's episode. That's all my starts and sits for Week 7. That's all the matchups, all the matchups broken down. But if you have any questions about any more starts and sits, please leave a comment below. I would love to be able to help you guys out this week so you guys can win your fantasy matchup. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening today. So, please like and share this podcast. On the next episode, on Monday, I'll be doing my Week 7 reactions and all the fantasy studs and duds for Week 7. But if you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us at Facebook and Twitter at The Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you all Monday. Take care.